Okay, so once again, good day everyone. So for today, we're going to have a discussions about the introduction to quantitative analysis or quantitative data analysis or quantitative methods. No, so quantitative data analysis is one of those things that often strikes fear in students. No, it's totally understandable. Quantitative analysis is a complex topic called a daunting lingo like median, modes, correlation, and regression. Suddenly, we're all wishing we paid a little more attention in our mathematics class during, of course, your statistics, no, mathematics in the modern world, and so on. The good news is that while quantitative data analysis is a mammoth topic, gaining a working understanding on the basic it isn't that hard, even for those of us who avoid numbers and math. So in this discussion, we will be able to break the quantitative analysis down into simple bite-sized chunks so you can approach your research with confidence. No? So despite being a mouthful, quantitative data analysis simply means analyzing data that is number-based or data that can be easily converted into numbers without losing any meaning. Let's say, for example, category-based variables like gender, ethnicity, or native language could all be converted into numbers without losing meaning. Let's say, for example, English could equal 1, French 2, and so on. And this contrast against qualitative data analysis where the focus is on words, on the phrases and expression that can be reduced to numbers. If you were interested in learning about the qualitative analytics, I think we must discuss some details about the quantitative analysis used for. And to give us more details about the topic, let us all welcome our presenter. Go ahead.
Sir, before I proceed, I just want to know if I'm audible po.
Yes, sir.
Thank you po. So first of all, good morning, sir. Good morning, classmates. Allow me to introduce our group. I'm Jason Amarapoyawan, the leader of our group, and the following names that you guys were about to see on your screens are the names of my group mates. They are first Miss Ronquillo Adriana, which happens to be the assistant leader of our group, followed by Miss Soriano Alia Lauren, Miss Feliciano Justin Joy, Miss De La Cruz Lay Nicole. Next is Miss Baribar Jansen, Mr. Ilagan Roel Jr., and last is Mr. Pasagi Alejandro. And we are from the group number 1. So if we are talking about numbers, sample and population, statistics, and hypothesis, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? Or what do you think our topic is all about? Anyone?
Quantitative methods.
Yes, definitely. We are talking about quantitative methods. So here's our group to discuss you guys the introduction or the fundamentals of basically what we need to know about the quantitative methods and how was it differ or how is it different with other kinds of methods in research. So for the definition, here's Ms. Soriano to enlighten us more about the topic. So Ms. Soriano, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Poyawan. So, quantitative methods. What is quantitative research? According to Aliaga and Gunderson 2002, quantitative research is explaining phenomenon by collecting numerical data that are analyzed using mathematically based methods or in particular statistics. So, yung quantitative research po is explaining phenomenon. Next slide. What is phenomenon? Phenomenon is a peculiar incident that can happen anywhere with any discipline or any organization. So in research po, hindi na tayo after sa mga common or ordinaryong pangyayari. Kasi ano pa po yung i-research natin kung wala naman ng bago or kakaiba dun sa pangyayari na yun. Here are the examples of phenomena po. Next. So in quantitative research po, we deal with phenomenon, mga peculiar, unique, and extraordinary situations or happenings. Quantitative research deal with numerical data that are analyzed using statistics. It is ideal for studying phenomena that must contend with the problems of measurement. In studying a phenomenon, quantitative research attempt to measure relevant factors and variables by attaching numeric values that express quantity. Analyzing numbers to answer a scientific inquiry is done through mathematical formulas, usually in descriptive and inferential statistics. So now po, Mr. Ruel Elagan will discuss the characteristics of quantitative methods.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Soriano, for wonderful presentation. So let's proceed to quantitative. Okay. So let's proceed to quantitative research characteristics. So in this segment, I will discuss the parts and elements of quantitative methods. So quantitative research characteristics divides into 8 parts as stated in presentation. So number 1, it is first characteristic. It is usually conducted for a larger sample sizes. So can you imagine conducting an interview to 100 adults? So it is really time consuming to organize, to transcribe, to code, as well to apply teams for research. So in this section, the recommendation for a larger sample sizes is use quantitative methods. And that leads us to second part, the use of structured research instrument. So based on our example, instead of having qualitative method or interview, we will administer research instrument. So how we will administer research instrument? If we say research instrument, it can be anything that you use perform a task. In this case, research instrument is a set of questions derived with your title. So in quantitative research, the instrument is designed to be independent of the research team and to collect valid and reliable data. Some of the examples are surveys and questionnaires. And third, it is objective, not subjective. So researchers in quantitative tend to maintain an objective distance from the topic matter. This due to the fact that quantitative research is objective in that it only seeks precise measurements and analysis of target concepts to answer inquiry or question. A subjective point of view is based on personal perception of the issue, while objective point of view is based on facts. Making an objective observation is making unbiased, balanced observation based on facts that can be verified. And four, it has a hypothesis. So another characteristic of quantitative methods is having a hypothesis. So what is the role of hypothesis in quantitative methods? So in hypothesis, we are studying whether one variable is related to another or determine the difference between two variables. So next slide, please. For example, next slide. For example, there is a significant difference between the performance of the students in an interactive group and the chalk talk technique group after the experiment. So the given case is that there are two groups, the interaction group and the chalk talk technique group. So the research is aimed at identifying if there is difference in performance between two groups after performing the experiment. So kung papababain natin, inaalam ng research kung may pagkakaiba ba sa dalawang grupo pagkatapos nila turuan. Ayun. So next slide please. 5. Researchers use computer software to interpret data. So once we gather data, we need to interpret results. Next slide, please. So once we gather data, we need to interpret results. So using computer is one of the common things to explain gathered data. Microsoft Excel is one of the most used software for data analysis. SPPS, which stands for Statistics Package for the social science, is one of the most well-known package for quantitative method. It provides numerous statistical analysis choices and output in the form of tables, graphs, pie charts, other layouts, and other layouts. The software is simple to use. The data entered must be correct, and the appropriate method of analysis must be chosen. Otherwise, the results will be misleading or incorrect. So makikita niya sa presentation, yung Microsoft Excel, common na sa atin yan eh. Alam na natin kung saan natin ginagamit yan. Ginagamit din yan sa research for data analysis. And yung sa baba niyan, yung bilog na color blue, ang tawag diyan SPPS or Statistic Package for the Social Science. Ayun yung pinaka-common na ginagamit ng mga researchers for complex data analysis. And pwedeng pabalik sa previous slide. Number 6, data is presented with the use of tables and figures. Since quantitative research involved many respondents, tables and graphs such as bar graph are capable of presenting data. Tables are often to use showcase raw data rather than to demonstrate a link between variables. Figures, on the other hand, are visual presentations of results. They come in the form of graphs, charts, drawings, photos, or maps. Figures provide visual impact and can effectively communicate your primary finding. Next slide, please. Ayan po, pwedeng babalik. Ayan po yung figures and tables, yung color white na pa-box na. Next slide, please. So, number 7. Parts of the studies are reviewed before the data is collected. Next slide, please. So, nag-provide ako ng example ng framework for data gathering. So, we will begin with the title, then the statement of the problem or hypothesis. The statement of the problem must be connected to the title. Kaya po may hypothesis, posible magkaroon, depende po sa uri ng research. Next, to the scope definition. In this section, it will focus the studies on the scope and limits of research. Next is RRL, also known as review-related literature, reading journals related to studies. In relation to that, you will come up with an idea about research design, research instrument, and data gathering, procedures for gathering data. Next slide, please. And lastly, it can be replicated or repeated. Research can be replicated. This is one of the characteristics of quantitative method, because quantitative research has a reliable and accurate data gathered that is reusable for other studies related to it. This means other researchers can test the findings of the research. And that concludes my parts. And next reporter will be Miss Lady La Cruz. You may now begin.
Thank you, Mr. Ilagan. Advantages of quantitative research. Quantitative research is often used to standardize data collection and generalize findings. It allows the researcher to measure and analyze data to arrive to an objective answer to the problem. This is because quantitative research is objective in approach in the sense that it only seeks precise measurements and analysis of target concepts to answer his inquiry. The result is reliable since the study uses a big sample of the populations. Larger studies provide stronger and more reliable results because they have smaller margins error and lower standards of deviation. Standards are usually used in choosing the instrument, in sampling procedures, and choosing statistical treatment, thus making the research replicable. Applying well-established standards means that the research can be replicated and then analyzed and compared with similar studies. Next. Personal biases can be avoided since personal interaction is not part of the process. Because quantitative data is statistical in nature, bias is less likely to occur. This means that a researcher's subjective reasoning has a less of an impact on the results. Processes involved are simplified since the steps in doing quantitative research are made easy and systematic. Being systematic is searching, selecting, and managing the best available evidence for research according to a defined, planned, and consistent method. Result can be reduced through statistical treatments and interrupted in a few statements. Statistical treatment of data is taking raw data and turning it into something that can be interrupted and used to make decisions. And here's Mr. Poyawan to give us more knowledge about quantitative research. The floor is yours now, Mr. Poyawan.
Thank you, Ms. Lay de la Cruz. So for us to fully comprehend what quantitative really is, let's differentiate it with other kinds of research method, which is the qualitative methods. Actually, there's another kind of research method, which is named mixed method. It's actually the combination of the quantitative and the qualitative, but to avoid much confusion, let's just focus on these two. So first, in quantitative, it says there that it focuses on testing theories and hypotheses. So, kaya kung mapapansin po natin, ang quantitative ay may hypothesis, and at the end of the research, it will either accept or reject niya yung hypothesis. Same goes sa theories po. It will either prove or disprove niya yung theory sa quantitative. That is also exactly the reason why theory is existing in a quantitative research. It is to support or disagree in that particular theory pagdating po sa end ng isang research. On the other hand, sa qualitative naman, it focuses on exploring and explaining ideas and experiences. Gusto nilang malaman at mapaliwanag kung ano po yung nakita nila, na-experience nila, ano yung na-observe nila, which is yung mga respondents ng isang qualitative research, pwede yung experience po ng researcher or experience po ng napiling subject or respondents ng researcher sa isang qualitative research po. Yun po ang pagkakaiba nila pagdating sa area na yan. Pangalawa, in quantitative research naman, it analyzed through data through the use of a statistical analysis. Ito po yung statistical formula or statistical treatment, just like ng mga examples po na nasa screen, which are the Spearman, Pearson, ANOVA, Chi-square, and etc. On the contrary, sa qualitative naman po, ina-analyze naman po yung mga nagagather nilang data, pero hindi po yung mere data. It analyzed by summarizing, categorizing, and interpreting. And one of this method po na ginagawa nila is yung thematic analysis among others. Kasi meron pa pong iba like content analysis and etc. So ang ginagather po dito, kung hindi numeric data, these are the respondents' responses. Ito po yung mga sagot, ito po yung mga nakita ng mga researchers, ito po yung mga narinig ng researchers, ito po yung nakita nila like yung mga artifacts po, then i-represent ng researcher yung analysis niya tungkol po roon sa nakita niyang artifacts and such. Doon po umiikot kapag ang ginagamit na method is qualitative. Thirdly, in quantitative po, it mainly expressed in numbers, tables, and graphs. So ito po yung mga sinasabi natin kanina na gumagamit ang statistical analysis. Obviously, gumagamit po siya ng numeric data. And this numeric data are presented po by tables, also in graphs. Pero most often, mas ginagamit po yung table, pero depende po sa topic, they also use graphs. But that, yeah. On the other hand, sa qualitative naman, it mainly expressed in words through narrations. So kung ano po yung narinig, kung ano po yung output ng interview o ginawang data gathering sa qualitative through narration, so kinuwento po nila. So halimbawa po, nag-interview sila or nag-focus sa group discussion ng sasabihin, it will either isusulat or i-record po nila. At ito po yung nagiging data ng qualitative methods. Kasi parang, yeah. Kasi po kapag sa qualitative methods, dito po, hindi po nag-exist yung numbers sa pagkuha ng data. Dito po, pwede pong yung data gathering nila, method nila is through interviewing or pwede rin pong may mga tanong po sa journal and dun po sasagot yung mga respondents nila. Pero these questions is hindi po dapat siya answerable by yes and no. The question should always start by how, why, or explain. And then the next one, in quantitative, it requires a large number of respondents. So karaniwan, marami po. Grupo-grupo ang respondents ng quantitative methods. So example, ang teachers, students, community members, and etc. On the other hand, sa qualitative naman, it does not require a large number of respondents. So contrasting po sila palagi. Yung qualitative po, hindi po kailangan ng sobrang dami, but does not necessarily mean na isa lang. Pero hindi po ganun karami. So examples are the admins, officials, individual, or a specific set of individuals. Next is in quantitative, it uses close-ended questions that are answerable by yes or no, true or false, multiple choice, and also the Likert scale. On the other hand, sa qualitative naman po, it uses open-ended questions that usually require an explanation. For example, katulad ng sinabi ko kanina, pwedeng i-explain niyo po sa respondents, ask them how that thing happened or why is it happening. So dito po sa quantitative, close-ended questions, answerable daw po dapat sa yes or no, true or false, multiple choice, yung A, B, C, D, and also the Likert scale. Ito po yung parang 1 to 5, from on the scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most agreeable and the 1 being the less agreeable. Parang, and 3 is the kineme. And lastly is that in quantitative, it uses controlled and modified variables. And in qualitative, it focuses on an individual, a particular set of people, pwede rin pong by ethnicity, a phenomenon, or an event. So next we have Mr. Pasage to discuss us the importance of quantitative methods in a research. Mr. Pasage.
Next slide, please. Thank you, Mr. Payawan. Now let's discuss the importance of quantitative methods in research. In research investigation, quantitative research methods are crucial, especially in the social science, healthcare, and other industries that produce significant quantities of data. With the use of this technique, statistical correlation and patterns can be measured by gathering and analyzing numerical data. There are many ways to view the importance of quantitative methods in research. Next slide, please. Mr. Pao, next slide, please. Mr. Payawan. Next slide,
The
please.
next slide na siya, bro.
This is the five methods used in quantitative research. Number one is objectivity. Number two is generalization. Number three is ease of analysis. Four, precision and accuracy. And the last is replication and verification. So what do you mean by objectivity? Because they are based on empirical data, quantitative research technique lessen the influence of subjectivity and personal prejudice. The findings are more objective and trustworthy, which support more credible findings using established method for data collecting and analysis, reducing researcher bias and ensuring that the research is carried out in a controlled atmosphere are always to attain objectivity. Number two, generalization. The increased sample size offered by quantitative research technique facilitates the generalization of results to a larger population. Number three, ease of analysis. Statistical software package make it simple to examine large amount of data, making it easier to see pattern in linkage. Yung example po natin dito sa ease of analysis, nationwide election, katulad po ng nangyari sa atin ng last na botohan. Which is, gumagamit po sila ng statistical software package to make it simple to examine the large amount of data. Number four, precision and accuracy. Due to the accuracy and specificity of quantitative approaches, researcher may examine the correlation between variables and assess the efficacy of interventions and treatments. The last, and number five, replication and verification. Study findings are encouraged by quantitative research methodologies which produce more trustworthy results. The floor is now yours, Mrs. Rogelio.
I believe Ms. Baribar should have been the reporter first. Hence, I will pass the floor to Ms. Baribar. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rogelio. So I'm Johnson Bolivar, and I'm going to discuss the different designs of quantitative research. So before I introduce the different designs, what is a research design all about? Research design is a framework of the research study. It's a strategy of how the researcher conduct their study just to answer the research question. So here are the different designs of quantitative research. Number one is a descriptive. Number two is correlational. Number three is causal comparative. And number four is experimental. And under experimental, there is a quasi-experimental and true experimental. In descriptive research, this research design aims to obtain information systematically describe a phenomenon, situation, or population. More specifically, it helps to answer the what, where, when, and how questions regarding the research problem, rather than why. When we say descriptive, the first thing we thought is a narration of what we saw or observed. In quantitative, descriptive is a form of narration, but in a statistical way. In other words, the researcher interprets the table and narrates it into a descriptive form. And the reason why the why question is not classified to quantitative research question is because the answer of that question is more on narrative way. So that is a descriptive research design. The next one is correlational research design. In this type of research, it investigates the relationship between two or more variables without the researcher controlling or manipulating any of them. Correlational reflects the strength of the or direction of the relationship between two or more variables. The direction of correlational can be either positive or negative or zero or no relationship at all. In other words, correlational is more focused on the relationship or connectivity of the two variables. And then the only outcome can be positive or negative relationship. And the next one is causal comparative. Causal comparative research is used to identify the cause and effect relationship between the dependent variable and the independent variable. The researcher compared two groups to find whether an independent variable affected or influenced the outcome or the independent variable. In this type of research, the main objective is to identify the cause and effect of independent variable to dependent variable. In short, it focuses on the comparison of one variable to another variable. That is a causal comparative. And the lastly is a experimental research design. Under the experimental research design, there's a quasi and true experimental. The quasi-experimental design aims to establish the cause and effects between the independent variables and dependent variables. However, unlike a true experimental, a quasi does not rely on a random assignment. Instead, the respondents are assigned to a group and based on a non-random criteria. In short, the participants in this kind of research are selected by their specific standard or qualification just to find out the cause and effect of the two variables. And in true experimental naman po, true experimental design is one of the accurate forms of research design where participants are randomly assigned or assigning are non-existent and the variable can be manipulated by the researcher. Unlike experimental, a true experimental randomly selected their participant without any criteria just to find out the outcome between the independent and independent variables. That is all the different designs of quantitative research. And here is Ms. Ronquillo to tackle her topic.
Thank you, Ms. Baribar. Good morning, everyone. I am Ms. Ronquillo, and I will be discussing the statistical analysis and as well as its roles in quantitative methods. So first, we must, am I audible po?
Yes.
Thank you po. So first, we must understand what is statistical analysis. So statistical analysis, it is stated here that it is a procedure of performing the collection, organization, presentation, analysis, and interpretation of data in order to discern patterns and trends. So since it is said or it was stated that statistical analysis is a process, hence we must take specific or a series of actions in order to achieve this particular end. So what's our particular end in this situation? So statistical analysis is the particular end, and its steps that we should take in action are namely collection. So collection, in the collection stage, data is gathered, viable data is gathered to from a sample that representative of a population. So example of this is data from previous customers. You collect or gather the raw data from your previous customers, and then this data will undergo the organization stage. So under the organization stage, here data is cleaned, or organization stage is also called data cleaning. It is the identification and deletion of duplicate data and inconsistencies. So sa organization po, dito po inaayos yung raw data. Tinatanggal po yung hindi kailangan, yung walang pine-play na relevance dun sa mismong study. So after ma-delete or ma-remove yung mga irrelevant data sa study, dadaan naman po siya sa presentation. So presentation, this is an extension stage for organization. Presentation is arranging data to know the best way to analyze the data. So here's a presentation, pine-present or inaayos yung data. In-order siya kung gaano siya kahalaga doon sa study. And inaayos din kung saan siya banda, kung ano yung may mga relationship na kailangan ipag-compare or ipag-contrast, and kung ano yung mga kailangan i-formulate. So after the presentation stage, we have the analysis stage. So analysis stage is the manipulation of data sets using statistical techniques. Statistical techniques are techniques that are used to analyze the data. I deem that the next groups would be discussing the statistical techniques, sorry. Hence, I wouldn't really expound it further. So sa analysis stage, um, maaaring gumamit ng computer softwares to reduce human error. Kasi dito na po tayo nagpo-compute, gumagamit ng iba't ibang formula para malaman kung ano nga ba yung study, yung relationships or results ng study natin from raw data. And the last stage, of course, is interpretation. Here, you will see the conclusive results. It can be interpreted in charts, table, or graphs. So, in interpretation data, here, the raw data is already transformed into useful or meaningful information. So, under the interpretation stage, there might also be, or there should also be, descriptive interpretations that should be understandable by non-professionals. Example, you made a study about the previous customers, as stated a while ago, previous customers of a business. Hence, your study or your interpretation of the meaningful information from your raw data should be understandable not just by your business partners or your employees. It should also be understandable by your customers, which may not have the deep under deep knowledge about your business. So dito po dapat in other terms, statistical analysis is the transformation of raw data into useful or meaningful information that is understandable by everyone. So sabi naman po dito sa baba, there are 7 types of statistical analysis. So meron tayong 7 types ng statistical analysis, but there is 2 major types. So yung first 2 po is the descriptive and inferential, which are the major types of statistical analysis. And the other 5 are predictive, prescriptive, exploratory, causal, and mechanistic. So let's just give a short overview of each statistical analysis type. Number 1, descriptive. Descriptive is used to describe features of data and summarize it. So, from the word itself, descriptive, nagde-describe lang po siya. Yung statistical analysis na to, ginagamit siya para mag-describe lang kung ano yung behavior ng data na transform mo sa information. And the second one is inferential. In inferential, it makes inferences for the generalization of the population using samples. So, yung sa inferential po, again, from the word itself, inferential or inference. Dito po, gumagawa ng inferences or ng parang sort of prediction or pinoprove yung hypothesis kung acceptable ba or null. And then the third one is predictive. Predictive is used to respond to the question what might happen. So dito po nalalaman natin yung likelihood or possibility ng future outcomes. Example po sa business again. Let's just focus on business since it is one of the most um, relevant applications of this topic. Sa business po, kung gagamitan siya ng predictive statistical analysis, maaaring malaman ng business owners or ng affiliates yung mga maaaring maging trend sa susunod base doon sa past na behavior ng customers, ng employees, ganun po. And then number 4 is prescriptive. Prescriptive is a response to what should be done. So, dito parang nagbibigay na po siya sa atin ng advice. Kung sa number 3, nag-predict siya kung ano yung mga maaaring mangyari sa future or the likelihood of future outcomes. Sa prescriptive naman, nire-relay niya yung mga predictions na yon into advices. Hence, we would be able to know what should we do or yung kung ano po yung best possible action based sa isang situation na nandoon tayo. Prescriptive analysis, is an advice aiming optimal recommendation in decision making. Dito po nalalaman natin ano yung pinaka the best na maaari nating gawin base doon sa study. Number 5 is exploratory. Exploratory focuses on identifying patterns. So, ina-explore niya po yung population or yung data from your sample that is derived from your population. The explorations made in this exploratory statistical analysis is used to preview or check missing data or relay or pardon to expound what are the relationships between each data and what are the behavior of each of them. Number 6 is causal. Causal naman po is response to the question why. Why or WH, why? Dito po sa causal, from the word itself, cause, tinatanong natin ano bang cause ng isang pangyayari. Bakit naging ganito? Bakit naging ganyan? In other words, causal is the root cause of something. Ano yung pinaka root cause ng isang bagay? Halimbawa po, yung isang bagay may cause siya. Pero yung cause na yon, pwede pa nating malaman kung ano yung pinaka root cause niya bago siya dumating doon sa conclusion. And last but definitely not the least, is the mechanistic. Ito pong mechanistic, hindi siya common or napaka hindi siya cliche na statistical analysis or type. Mechanistic is used to understand changes in a variable that makes changes in other variables. Dito po para siyang pwede natin siyang ihambing sa causal pero yung comparisons dito sa mechanistic is how one variable affects one variable and how this latter variable affects the previous variable. Next slide, please. So, here naman po, I will be discussing the roles of statistical analysis. So, statistical analysis has its roles. Bakit nga ba siya ideal na gamitin? So, statistical analysis, first we have, it lends credibility to the research data. Mas nagiging credible po or mas nagiging strong yung integrity, nagiging accurate yung research data natin kapag dinaan natin siya sa isang statistical analysis. We all know that statistics is quite objective. It is not subjective. Or we may say subjective siya, pero sa application lang siguro yon. But the main idea or the main field of statistics is objective. Hence, kapag objective ang isang bagay, mas nagiging sure tayo kung credible ba siya gamitin para dun sa research data natin. Second is, it makes the data more comprehensible by each reader. As I've stated a while ago, statistical analysis should be interpreted in a way that it would be understandable for everyone, including the the individuals that do not have a vast knowledge about the concept being studied. So it makes the data more comprehensible. Mas sa pamamagitan ng statistical analysis, since may interpretation siya ng tables, graphs, or kung charts, sorry. Since may interpretation siya ng table, charts, or graphs, mas nag-engage yung readers or yung mga, mas nagiging engaging siya sa mga taong wala namang vast knowledge or walang gaanong alam doon sa concept. Since nagigets nila yung pagka-interpret using statistical analysis. Third is, it rules out any chance of human bias. Since objective siya, na tatanggal yung possibility ng bias. Unlike sa qualitative, which is as stated by Mr. Poyawan a while ago, qualitative is consists of open-ended questions. Hence, mas nagiging possible dun yung pagkakaroon ng bias. Unlike dito, na may sinusundan na statistical techniques or formulas na hindi maaaring makontrol ng isang individual para maging advantage sa sarili niyang bias. Fourth is, it assists in eliminating topics that are of no use. Sa statistical analysis, na-eliminate natin yung mga irrelevant topics or data or information na hindi naman kailangan dun sa study natin. It makes the study concise yet detailed. And last one is it exhibits significance across different fields. Statistical analysis already showed its importance or its significance across different fields. May it be in medical or business or educational, academic. Sa lahat ng fields, maaari nating gamitin yung statistical analysis. That's basically the overview of statistical analysis and its role in quantitative methods. So with that, I would like to call Mr. Poyawan to give us a brief synopsis of our discussion for today. Thank you po.
So basically, quantitative is more about focusing the numbers more on the statistical analysis as compared to the other kinds of research methods. So now that we expounded the topic really well, bit by bit, we hope that you learned something, guys. So that's what's wrap our report. Have a great day.
Okay, so the topic focus on quantitative methods in research, no? Again, it's just actually covered naman actually with the quantitative research methods, no? So, quantitative methods in research involves collecting and analyzing numerical data through statistical method, as our presenter mentioned. And this approach often used in social sciences, no, psychology, economics, no, IT, and other fields to measure and quantify various aspects of phenomenon or population. And some examples include the survey, experiments, statistical analysis of existing data sets. No? And this method often involves collecting data from a large number of participants or sample using standardized questionnaires or instruments, no? To ensure consistency and advocacy of data collection. So the data collected through quantitative methods can be analyzed using various statistical techniques, no, to identify patterns, relationships, and trends. And this type of analysis allows researchers to make generalizations about a population of phenomenon and test hypotheses. And quantitative research is often used to support evidence-based decision-making, as the result can be expressed in numerical terms and can provide a basis for comparison and evaluation. However, it is important to note that quantitative research has its limitations, no, and may not always capture the full complexity of phenomenon or population. And some additional details about quantitative research method, of course, is the research design. Our presenter gave us a discussion that quantitative research typically follows a structured research design that involves defining the research question, identifying the population or sample to be studied, selecting appropriate data collection methods, and determining the statistical analysis techniques to be used. Data collection methods. Now, quantitative research method often involve collecting data through survey experiments and observation. Surveys are commonly used to collect data from the large population, while experiments are used to test cause and effect relationship. Observational studies involve recording behaviors or events, no, without intervening. The data analysis techniques, no, quantitative research relies on the statistical analysis techniques to identify patterns, relationships, and trends in the data. These techniques include descriptive statistics, as what we've done already, the mean, median, and mode. Inferential statistics, no, I just want to only focus with mean, median, and mode, no, but of course, even the next group will be able to discuss the quartile, no, the variance, no, even of course the standard deviation and frequency, no. So in inferential statistics such as t-test, ANOVA, and so on, and multivariate analysis such as regression analysis. The sampling or the quantitative research often involves sampling, which is the process of selecting a subset of population to the study. So the goal of sampling is that, which is the process of selecting a subset of population, is to obtain a representative sample that accurately reflects the characteristic of the population being studied. And of course, it is important to consider the validity and reliability. Now, quantitative research methods aims to produce reliable and valid data. Reliability refers to the consistency of the result, while validity refers to the accuracy of the data and where it measures what it is intended to measure. Again, to summarize, no, quantitative research method provides a systematic approach to collecting and analyzing numerical data to investigate a research question. It is widely used in many fields, including ITE, social science, health sciences, and business. So I think that's it for this topic.